Welcome to Books in the Freezer, a podcast dedicated to the deliciously disturbing world of horror fiction. I'm your host, Stephanie, and today I am joined by author Erika T. Wurth to talk about her latest novel, The Haunting of Room 904, and sibling horror. So, Erika, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. And I apologize in advance if my dogs decide to angrily bark at an ant. If I leave them out, they want in. If I leave them in, they want out. And so it's a whole thing. So, yes.
No, I fully understand. I'm actually dog sitting this week, and we have these huge windows in the front of our house that are low enough for the dogs to be able to see outside. So every time someone is walking their dog, it's just nonstop barking.
Yeah. Especially my dogs. They're very like pro human, all human beings except for a random one. They're like, I love you. I actually go home with you. Whereas all dogs are like, horrible threat, And I'm like, guys, you're self hating. Let's love other dogs.
Well, you have a book coming out, The Haunting of Room 904. Would you mind telling our listeners a little bit about it?
Yeah, the log line is a little bit lengthier than it was for White Horse. And essentially, it's about a woman. The short, right, is a woman with mysterious powers who has 3 weeks to use them to solve her sister's, the sort of crime of her sister's suicide slash maybe murder, or her mother will die. But the longer log line is essentially a woman who's getting her PhD in psychology. She's always been very science oriented, like her father. Father's white, her mother's indigenous, and her sister and her mother are very woo woo. And her sister's been out in and out of rehab because she claims to see these paranormal things, and it kind of messes her up. And the night that she's finishing with her PhD, her sister calls her and is like, "If you don't come to the Brown Palace, I'm going to die." And she's like, "Calm down. I'm drunk. Come get drunk with me. You're being ridiculous." So, and then hangs up the phone. And then she wakes up to a vision of her sister, and she knows her sister is dead. She thinks her sister has suicided in the Brown Palace, a hotel in Denver here where I'm from. And her life falls apart. She can't do academia. Her mother's falling apart. She's really just recently lost her husband. And so she and her friend Alex start this paranormal investigator business because all of this sort of turns her powers on, if you will. So she's
Yeah.
flooded with seeing like ghosts and memories of other people. And then the Brown Palace calls her up about 5 years later and says, "Look, you're going to want to solve this crime because your sister is now haunting this room." And she's like, "Absolutely not. I'm not going to do that." And then her mother checks into the same hotel, reappears in that room where the women reappear, and die 3 weeks later. So she knows she has 3 weeks to solve this crime, or her mother will die.
The stakes are high. And also, I did not know the Brown Palace was a real hotel.
Yeah, yeah, I love doing that in Denver. It's just an added thing. I think I'm one of those writers who cares a lot about where I'm from
Mhm.
and where I've been, and all those different landmarks. In the White Horse, there's an actual White Horse bar. It's an Indian bar. It was an Indian bar for 30 years. It's now been closed since the pandemic. But it was a bar called the White Horse for 50 years. So I love doing that.
I was looking at it on TikTok. People do like high teas there and stuff.
Absolutely. It's ridiculously but wonderfully overpriced, beautiful, silly place. At Christmas, they have like an actual bull in there. I forgot there's an event, the little ceremony that revolves around a bull in the tea shop, in the china shop. So yeah, they have high teas and they have like weirdly ornate bars, but in the end, the spark for this was the fact that in room 904 there's this woman who was this like huge socialite in Denver, and when she retired in room 904 and died in there, and her ghost still haunts room 904. And when they were doing repairs and there was no phone in the room, they would constantly get calls from room 904. I assume she was really her room was being torn up, and she didn't like that.
That's so spooky.
Yeah.
I also loved, I mean, Olivia's job is she's this paranormal investigator, and she, throughout the book, finds these haunted objects. And I loved those chapters as she's doing her work and finding this, and I just wanna know, like, did you grow up watching, like, ghost hunter shows, or, like, what was the research process like for these paranormal chapters?
That I have to say, objects of mystery or haunted objects are my absolute obsession. I'm constantly on eBay looking at paranormal objects. There's like a whole section for it. And I
Yeah.
especially like paranormal and haunted mirrors. And I'm always like, gosh, I wonder if I bought one, if it would ever be actually paranormal and I would regret it. I saw a great film, I forgot the title years ago with that. But yeah, no, those didn't exist when I was growing up. So it was just, my community and my family. Like, I don't really
Yeah.
have paranormal experiences per se, and nothing that would be like directly like I saw a ghost. But they're
Mhm.
they're obsessed. Like I grew up with people who were like, I saw the devil looking in my trailer last night. um, your father, came to me last night and, he'd been dead for years. Like, so this was like a daily occurrence. So I suppose that's my research. But I did stay a night at the Brown Palace.
Oh, yeah? Anything spooky happen?
No, actually, I did also stay a night at the Stanley Hotel where White Horse was. And that that the Brown Palace is just very pretty, and nothing spooky happened that I can remember there. Although I didn't stay in room 904, I couldn't. It was just too expensive. But in the Stanley, the room that my niece and I stayed in, there's supposedly a cowboy that will like wake you up by sitting at the foot of the bed or by scratching your legs. And we
Ugh,
bought him.
I hate
I
this
know he's
already.
so
I hate this.
yeah, it's so much. And I genuinely, when we're like, it's one of those things where I don't, again, I wouldn't say I'm sensitive to these things or I don't even know where I stand on them. But when you go into the room, you're like, wow, this does feel different. And so we bought him a spirit plate, my niece and I, cornbread, right? And since he was a historical cowboy, we're like, hey, I know your people and my people didn't always get along, but here is a plate of cornbread and it's all for you. Every time we talk to him, that light flickered.
That's so creepy.
Yeah.
I
In the middle
also
of
I feel like I'm more of a skeptic, but I don't know, these stories do, like, get to me a little bit. Ugh.
Exactly. No, I think because I'm a skeptic, I pursue them obsessively because now I want to believe, right?
Yeah. The other day, I was looking at Facebook Marketplace, and I saw a listing for vintage Looney Tunes, mugs. It was a set of 3, and the listing said they were haunted. Haunted mugs.
See, I love haunted because if you break the mug, does it free the ghost or
I don't know.
does it get angry or does it possess you?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot in your book about making amends with the past and letting things go, and I had such a beef. I mean, you're supposed to, as she's the nemesis of this book, but with this journalist in this novel,
Yeah,
I viscerally hated her. I hated her so much.
same, same. I yelled at the computer as I was writing it. I was just like, "You are an asshole."
Yeah, at the very
Yeah.
least.
She's an effective bad guy, I think. I try not to make my bad guys too two-dimensional, but let's just say she was a hard one to not just let her be exactly what she is, because there are folks like that, right?
There are, and I think just at this moment in time, especially,
Oh
just like
god, yeah.
sensationalist news and journalists and
That is the thing you
just go.
learn, as a writer, like, as your career kinda goes up, you actually learn there like, I thought it's in the book, and I was wrong. It's the Broadcasting Act that, Fairness and Broadcasting Act that Reagan
Mhm.
eliminated. That
Yes.
never existed for newspapers or magazines. It actually never existed. So you have all
It was radio only, right?
anything. Yeah, that's right. And then it became TV and now it's none. And so you literally can publish nothing and we just have to and like they can say anything and there is no you just have to say, do I trust this source or not? And of course, when it emotionally tells you what you want to hear, you believe it. So yeah, fun times we live in.
It's fine. We haven't seen any type of societal decline because of that. It's totally cool.
God no. God no. You know?
But today we are talking sibling horror, and this is a book that I would say mainly revolves around Olivia's relationship with her sister and her mission to find out what happened to her sister and dig into that. So, what is that relationship?
Yeah, earlier you'd said something about making amends, and there are big amends, right? So there's the backdrop of the Sand Creek Massacre, for which I
Mhm.
basically the people who are the descendants of the survivors, my cousin being one of them, although he didn't ask this, but they oftentimes would prefer people not just use it casually. And so,
Yeah.
especially not a descendant. So, in the book, I refer to it as a massacre, but that's what I'm referring to because I grew up right by that. And it is one of the most terrifying, awful things, that I can imagine people experiencing. And it's just a reminder of how evil people can be. And so I think the project in the book is like, okay, what would this, how would it affect us now, people who are related on either side? And what would reconciliation be like? And yeah, it absolutely mirrors the sibling reconciliation, which is how do you reconcile with somebody when you feel badly and complicated about your relationship with them when they're actually dead?
Yeah.
And then of course if they're haunting you, you would inevitably be like, I feel guilt. You know what I mean? This
Yeah.
must be because I did it wrong.
It's
So
complicated, it's layered.
plus cool haunted narrative stuff.
Yeah, of course. Do you have siblings?
I do. I have one and a half, which sounds weird, but I have one sibling, who's my full sibling, and I have one who is a half sibling that I kind of knew about later. And so my relationship with, honestly, my full sibling is far more complicated than with my half sibling. Um, so yeah, that's it 100% informed this book. There's no way around.
Are you the eldest?
I am. Yes. Yes. Ah. Yeah.
Like eldest sister energy.
Oh God. It's like one of those things, when you see tweets or just memes or whatever, and it's all kind of goofy internet detritus. But whenever it's like, this is for older siblings and older siblings only and older, sisters only, I'm like, yeah, that applies to me. That actually, I am the caretaker of everyone, so that's correct. Yeah.
There are definitely a lot of stereotypes I fall into with eldest daughter, but my sister, I think my younger sister is a little more type A than I am, actually. She's a little more
Um,
in control. She has her stuff. She has her shit together a little more than I do, I think.
yeah, I
Which is
think it's
odd for
interesting
like
to
a
watch.
middle child.
Interesting. She's like breaking out. She's like, I'm no longer this middle child thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, my stepsons, they're definitely opposites. Like the youngest is 100% type A, and my eldest is like party guy. But he's still in Dartmouth, so he made it through. But yeah,
God.
it's my youngest sibling or my youngest stepson who is much more type A. Yeah.
We should talk about some movies that also center around siblings.
Yes. Yes.
Did you ever watch the 2005 House of Wax?
You know what? My problem with horror movies is I watch them so compulsively and constantly that they're ones that stand out for me for whatever reason. Like The Ring is my favorite, right?
Yeah.
And that's non-sibling at all. But House of Wax, that is definitely one where I'm like, have I seen that? And I cannot remember.
That would be totally fair because it was in that, like, remake mania of the aughts. It holds a special place in my heart, but there's, a group of they're not teens, I wanna say maybe they're college students on a road trip heading to see a football game, and they, of course, have car trouble, and they come across this, like, seemingly abandoned town where there's this wax museum. Is this ringing a bell?
Yes, it is. Actually, no, that was pretty scary. That was pretty freaking, yeah, I like that one.
Yeah, that was an early one, but, Chad Michael Murray and Elisha Cuthbert are twins in that, and it's very much like there's a like, Elisha Cuthbert is, like, the good twin, and he's, like, the bad twin that's getting in trouble, but then when the antagonists are revealed, they are also twins, like, twin brothers, and it's also, like, a good twin, bad twin situation, so it's twins versus twins, which I thought
So
was
it's like
kind of
Star
fun.
Trek. It's like
Yeah.
alternative Spock has a goatee and is mean, you know? But yeah, I love that. All of my sibling relationships in my book start out as twins. And in 904, they were absolutely twins and they kind of evolved out. And my agent was like, you realize they're no longer twins in this section of the book. I'm like, oh. And I think it's because my sibling she doesn't look that unlike me. She's 5 years younger than I am. We're very, very similar in many, many ways. And yet we are nothing alike. And
Mhm.
that is And so for me, that dynamic is probably in some ways a fundamental part of my identity in my life. And I think you can see that in the book too, because the main character is extremely independent and extremely, she's a very strong personality. I see her as a sort of like kind of mid millennial, right? She's 35 and what do I have set at 2023 or 24? And so she's very independent, but there's the fact that she has guilt around her sister's death just takes her down every few years. Like whenever it's the anniversary of her sister's death, she's just not okay. And I think it's because there's no one that you share more genetic information with. There's no one that you share more
Yeah.
experiences, more jokes with.
Yeah.
They know everything about you. They know exactly how to hurt you. They know exactly
Yeah.
how to make you laugh. And I think that's why, and you're also thinking like, really, they're just a few genetic turns away or turns of life away from me. And so how come I'm not like them and how come they're not like me? So I think that's very strong in the
So that's interesting that your editor pointed out that they stopped being twins.
Yeah. Eventually, I was like, and I literally didn't realize. She's like, "Do you want them to be twins or do you not want them to be twins?" And I realized that I did not want them to be twins, and I don't even know why.
It's just the way it goes. Reminds me of, did you see Ginger Snaps?
That is when when I saw that on your list, I'm like, Erica, watch this before the show because I've been meaning to watch that for 5 years. I did see Jennifer's Body, but that's not applicable. Like I was fine. That was another one where I was like, okay, I need to watch Ginger Snaps, Jennifer's Body, and for some reason I made it Jennifer's Body and not Ginger Snaps.
Well, what'd you think of Jennifer's Body?
I fucking loved it. God, I loved the whole thing. It was just I love paranormal horror the best, right? This is what I'll go
Yeah.
or religious horror. Those are my favorites. Possession horror. But Jennifer's Body was so masterfully done, and I love God, what's her name? Megan nickname, can't remember. I love her as an actress. I love her as a person. She's very interesting, and she's so great in that film. So anyway, Ginger Snaps though.
This is about 2 sisters, but I also feel like there could have been a first draft where they were twins, like, they just seem very close, but they're a year apart, and they get introduced as kind of these, like, oddball sisters, like, in the opening scene of the movie, they have a hobby of recreating, like, murder photos
Okay,
of
now I
just, like,
have
one of them pretends to be a dead body, and they just take these, like, grotesque pictures. But then the older sister gets bitten by a werewolf and also, like, starts her period and, like, hits puberty, and so it's, like, kind of all these changes going on at once with her, and it's a very good movie.
I'm so sad. I was like, I'm gonna do it. Yeah, I love that too because again, nobody understands your sense of humor like your sibling. Even
Yeah.
if you're very different from your sibling, they know every single thing that you find funny, even if they don't, you know? So I love the idea of like two sisters doing completely insane things to the outside world because there is a twin factor to siblings, especially if they're close in age, where they kind of been each other's friends for like years, even if they don't even know one another later in life, right? So I love this
Yeah,
and I can't wait,
I love that. I mean, who else will take murder pictures with you, if not a
right?
sister?
Right? Yeah. I think I have a few friends, but definitely my siblings use murder pictures with me.
Did you see *Malignant*?
See, again, like I can't even remember now. You're having to remind me of the plots, and it really is a problem because I compulsively watch it, and so like in the end, like the names of these films like often don't hit me. I think yes, I'm almost positive I saw that.
It is batshit and goofy, but a woman God, I'm trying to think of how even to describe it without giving it away.
It looks like it's kind of like a slasher type ones, and those I have to admit I have a whole thing where and people have gotten mad at me on the internet for this. I call certain films or books girl horror and boy horror, and it doesn't matter. Like usually, yes, it is gendered, but it really doesn't matter because they're like, for example, I think Stephen King is girl horror, and I think Mallerman is girl horror because we're talking about the more thinking, paranormal stuff like that. Whereas to me, boy horror, like the Stephen Graham Jones, like slasher, you know what I mean? And that to me, I always find like gory, and it's like boy horror where it's like, cool, she was chopped up, it's cool. Whereas like girl horror is like, I'm actually frightened. It's like, what? what is in that darkened corner, So,
It has a bit of a supernatural angle. I don't wanna give it away if
okay.
you haven't seen
Mm.
it, but it, does revolve around her having a long-lost brother,
Oh.
long-lost twin, Gabriel.
See,
If
and
you
I've
know, you
probably
know.
God damn it, I've probably seen it now. I can't even remember. Why one thing will strike you, another thing will not, right? I don't even know. I also read a ton of ebooks like in the middle of the night. I'm an insomniac and I wake up, several times in the night. So it takes me about 20 minutes to an hour or longer to go to bed. And so I read compulsively, like all the
Mhm.
time in this twilight state. And so sometimes like there are 4 or 5 or 6 books I've read in a row in the middle of the night for weeks. And I'm like, was that from that book or that from that book? And which it doesn't help because I'll also watch horror before I go to sleep.
Yeah.
So the blending is quite real.
No, I get that. I feel like whenever I watch Friday the 13th, I always watch them all back to back to back, and to
Yes.
this day, I cannot tell you what happens in each specific one because they are just
Right.
kind of like one continuous story.
Yes. Yes. I think speaking of sibling horror, it's kind of part of the whole package. The From my era, right? I was a kid in the 80s and a teen in the 90s. And so my best friend is probably responsible for this particular habit of mine, reading and watching horror because she loved horror. She had me watch the Hellraisers, which terrified me to my core. And they are definitely a little girl horror, definitely boy horror, lots of gore. And, I was so interested, and then I thought to myself, like, could I help myself? Would I definitely get into the box, right? And then the other one was Freddy, like any Nightmare on Elm Street. We watched them
Yeah.
forever, and, like, you could tell I was a cynic and she was not because she was like, the end of one of the movies, she's like, "So Freddy's never coming back. They have done XYZ, and he cannot come back." I'm like, "If they make enough money from this movie, he will come back." And she was like, "No, you don't understand, Erica." But what I loved about that dynamic, right, and so much of horror is in this vein, is it's like all about kind of being maybe not a tween, which is even more liminal, but being a teen in general is kind of like you're not an adult, you look like
Yeah.
one, and you're not a kid, right? And you're still kind of in that twilight world. You're still a little bit, just enough in that other world. And this is why Freddie can get you, because he can
Yeah.
come to you because you're still kind of an open door in some ways. And you see like all the siblings having to convince one another, all the friends having to convince one another, and the adults, adults will never believe them, right? And so
Yeah.
like, talk about sibling bonding and then, oh no, but they're dead because Freddie got them.
Yeah. Ugh, the adults in the Nightmare on Elm Street universe are, I think, some of the most frustrating adults in horror, period.
Yes. It's just not happening.
My god, recently, I thought of the sibling duo from Nope, if you watch that.
Oh, yeah, yeah. That I
Uh,
have watched, that I will watch anything, Peele does, 100%. I love that film because it had this sci-fi element, and I'm kind of
mhm.
dorky on every level, like, I love horror, but I read as much science fiction and fantasy. Like, watching for some reason, it's almost 90% horror, like, these days for a variety of reasons, but I'll read almost as much fantasy and sci-fi as I will horror, and so what I loved about Nope was it was, like, definitely had the sci-fi element, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It also had its creepy moments.
Oh god, yeah. Yeah, the whole thing was just extremely imaginative. As I loved the concept of Us, but it felt like the execution just fell a little flat for me. Whereas Nope was like I was compelled from like minute to minute, like the whole way through. I'm like, why now? What now?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that might be one of my favorite sibling duos in horror. Um, Followed closely by the brother and sister in The Black Phone, where they are separated.
Yes.
You don't get to see them get together for a lot of it because the brother's been kidnapped. Sister does have, like, a supernatural ability too.
Right, right. So you get to see their closeness in a
Yeah.
different way, right? But there's also an opportunity for mystery to be held. Because I think, like, that's the thing, like, you never there's something, I know a lot of only children, like, my partner's an only child, and so he often is very puzzled by watching his 2 kids together. He's like, "Why do they do this?" And I'm like, "It is siblings," Um, and like when they were younger, the eldest totally bullied the youngest. He did all the time, and he'd be like, "Why does he do this?" I'm like, "Because these are the rules. They're the
Yeah.
rules." And you never see anyone who is more honest and more brutal with someone than siblings. And I feel like you see this in Nope. I feel like you see this in, Nightmare on Elm Street, and that kind of, again, that joking quality. And it just allows for a totally different kind of thing. I think in 904, what makes it again weird is the I have a few flashbacks, but overall she's sort of a presence that lives in the mirror, and then otherwise she's a presence that lives, in the main character's heart as just like a source of guilt, right? So, and
Mhm.
she has these also friends, these three friends, right? Who I feel like are kind of Sex in the City-ish in a way. There's Victoria, who's like very saucy and has a super high IQ, and she just tells you exactly what she thinks. I have a lot of female native relatives like that. And then there's Sarah, who's very sweet, and she's indigenous Mexican, and she's an academic, she's soft spoken. But they do kind of function as siblings because they're very blunt with one another. They have these
Yeah.
relationships with one another, and they're long term relationships. And I feel like if you have siblings or you have friendships like that are like siblings, although it's kind of creepy because one has a crush on the other in 904. But so I take some of that back. But you really again you get to see your character on. You don't just see them as an adult. You see who they are and were as a child and how it's affected
Yeah.
every single little part of them as an adult. And it's like insight into why they do the things they do. So.
Yeah. I mean, it's a closeness that's earned and an insight from a years-long relationship.
Mhm.
I was also thinking about Mike Flanagan's Haunting of Hill House series because I'd say the big change he made was making it about a family and about these adult siblings and seeing them as kids and seeing them as adults and seeing how their relationships change over time and the different dynamics of the siblings with each other and with this house, this memory that they all have.
Here we're going to find extreme common ground. I'm obsessed with everything Flanagan does. I always have been. I ran across Oculus, which is about siblings,
Oh,
very
yeah.
early on. Yeah, and I had no idea like who Flanagan was, and I just watched it and rewatched it and watched it again. I'll probably watch it tonight. I just talking about it'll make me do that. And then The Haunting of Hill House. I not only watched it twice, I watched it compulsively and then literally started watching it again. And it had all these elements I love, right? It's supernatural, it's paranormal, it's a gothic element to the house, it's sort of gothic. I love haunted house anything. So obviously I'll read I need to read Grady's latest actually before he puts out the next one because I love his work and I can't wait to see his take on that. But that The Haunting of Hill House and Oculus is something we could talk about too. For
Yeah.
me, what I love about them, and it's something I was an outsider with because I really was just raised with my one sibling. So our dynamic was singular. It was just she and she and I now. And unfortunately, our relationship is very bumpy. Ugh. So we have a very intense relationship. And, but I think for me, what in the Haunting of Hill House, it's the dynamic that families have when there are lots of siblings. And I
Yeah.
was always an outsider in that way. Like a lot of my friends had like five siblings and like two in another house and three in another house. Like literally, their lives were filled with siblings and cousins that might as well have been siblings. Absolutely little difference whatsoever. Sometimes they were living with them. And so that to me, it's so deep when you go back, and that's why I had to rewatch it, and you realize they're kind of being haunted by themselves often. Like they are
Yeah.
literally being haunted by themselves and their previous actions. And just the way that they're so fundamentally upset and brutal at one another. Diavola, now that's a sibling. That's if
Oh
you
my
read
god.
that, I was late to that particular book, and I thought maybe it was more of a slasher than a paranormal. I didn't realize it was paranormal, so I've been meaning to read this. Those That family dynamic was infuriating. Like I
I
was
was gonna
like,
say,
I
I'm like,
you
I
all,
can't
yeah,
with it. I was so mad.
yeah.
I was so angry for her.
Oh my god, the sibling, especially the brother. I would say that is probably the closest analog to 904 and to Oculus. Although, like the brother loved her so much that he almost wanted to be like to live with her, to be with her, to have, like a sibling life partner with her. But then he was just as willing to throw her under the bus as every other character in that family, and that blew my mind.
Yeah, I could not. I was so mad at them.
Oh my God. Like I wanted to walk in that book. I wanted to fly to Italy, go to that town, go to that house and just start hitting the parents, like physically hitting them. I'm like, I want to hit you in the face. She was, that was so good. And it was effectively frightening and compelling too. I love
Yeah.
something, there's just nothing better. Like, I love super commercial fiction, I love super smart fiction, but the best is when it's both, and Diavola did that, like, in spades, and, like, I really did think there would be one moment, speaking of sibling dynamics, where she would just kind of, like, let them have it. She never let them have it. Like, the brother was fucking
She was
terrible.
interested in her piece, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, she really was, and I kept in mind, I was like, "Oh, this is what I'm supposed to do most of the time," you know?
I
Although
feel
I was
that.
like, "You shouldn't have been on vacation with him at all, really," you know?
She thought it would be different this time.
Yeah.
Yeah, Oculus was interesting too because it's like a sister who is so invested in proving her brother's innocence and
Yes.
taking this
Yeah.
on.
Yes. Yes, it's just brilliant end to end, it's scary, um, it's compelling, haunted mirror, which obviously I'm like, "Oh, yes, all the haunted mirrors, please." But I love the whole sibling dynamic where they experience the same thing, but then he, of course, is like, "No, it wasn't real. You've got to understand it wasn't real." And then she has to reconvince him. And yeah, and yet the ghost wins again. It's just so, just end to end, that whole thing is just phenomenal.
I was also thinking of not a nice sibling dynamic, but the Helen Shivers and her sister in I Know What You Did Last Summer,
Yes, yes,
Sarah
yes.
Michelle Gellar, where I think it's her older sister. And Sarah Michelle Gellar, like, in the beginning is gonna go try and make it as an actress, and it's, like, a year later, and she's back home working at the parents' department store, and the sister just loves it. Loves, like, rubbing her face in the fact that she didn't make it.
Oh
In the
yeah.
book, it is a little different in that the Helen Shivers character has, like, her own apartment, and instead of, like, going to make it as an actress, she's, like, the new local news darling, and somehow that gives her like, she has an apartment, and the sister is a bitch to her, but then she tries to, like, move into her apartment and is, like, very jealous of her. So the jealousy is there in the movie and the book. The jealous sister dynamic.
Right. Yeah, I think that's something I think about a lot in my life. And again, it's, so to be completely frank, so my sibling, I have a doctorate. Like my mom was not only the one of the first in her family to get a 4-year degree, she was one of the first in her family to graduate high school. And then, so, they always talk about, like, especially with like Black and Indigenous and Latine people, right? There's potentially a lot of backslide. And so that did unfortunately happen in my family. My mom was one of the first to get 4-year degree and a high school degree, right? Both. And then for me, I went even further, right? Even though my parents were like, "Why are you doing that?" And I did a PhD. But my sister did not, and there are a lot of reasons for that. She has a lot of serious, disabilities, physical, mental. But she has a GED, and so I think my sister has always wondered why, why, why is this the case? In 904, I think what I wanted to do was give that, honor that experience, like no matter how, upset I've been with my sibling, I wanted to honor that. Again, if you see someone who really isn't that unlike you, that has a few more things in you, you're thinking, why? Why did
Mhm.
this happen? And it's harder to take accountability for those things. But I think it's also important for, and I think the sister in 904 does, there's that scene where the sister's like, I just want you to listen to me and not judge me and not tell me what to do because, you've accomplished these things and you've done these things. And then there's a sort of karmic comeuppance because the main character, Olivia, she, her entire life with her sibling was, you're not seeing these things. You and mom are just, wanting something fun. Um,
Mhm.
in your otherwise kind of like boring lives. And of course, when her powers are turned on, she really gets it. Like her life is torn apart. And I think she's able to have a newfound guilt, but also sympathy for her sister. Like, holy shit, if I had spent my entire childhood seeing ghosts, would I be,
Yeah.
would I get a doctorate in psychology? Would I have been able to be so cavalier? Would I
Yeah.
not have done like my sister, which is join any organization that would help me function, even if it failed her, you know?
Yeah. It definitely does help her have empathy for it once she is forced to be in her shoes.
Right. Yes. Yes. Well, and I wanted the main character to be a good person, a kind person, these things. But I also wanted to show that for her, her ambition kind of made her blind to these other ability, like this ability to see it from another point.
Well, should we talk about some books?
Yeah.
I can start us off with How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. This follows adult siblings, Louise and Mark, who are tasked with emptying their parents' house after they've passed away suddenly and tragically. There is a lot of tension with the two siblings. Louise has gone off and had a successful life. Mark, never left his hometown, is chronically unemployed. So, she kind of sees him as this like screw up, annoying little brother. And I will say, while reading this, for like the first half of the book, I was furious at Mark. I was so annoyed with him. And I knew, I was like, at some point, he's going to try to make me feel bad for him. He's like, Grady's going to try to give him a backstory and try to make me feel some kind of way for him. And you know what? It worked. I was like, dang it, he did get me. I do like Mark now.
Yeah.
I knew it was coming. I knew it was coming, and I'm like, "Okay, I do like him. I get where he's coming from."
Oh God. I so Grady Hendrix, as I'm so I've probably talked about this a million times in a million interviews. I was a super nerdy kid. Like I was tormented for it. Like, you're a weirdo and you look weird and you're weird and all this is true. I was weird and I did look weird. But I loved science fiction. I love horror. I love Stephen King. I loved any horror you could put in front of my face. I love fantasy. That's where I, first came about. So when you went into school when I did and you kept going, it was especially at the time like what I like to call realism and most people call literary was like the only thing that was like good to write, right? Like I was made
Yeah.
fun of for, and it worked. I was a stubborn kid, but I stopped reading this stuff. And so later on in my life, I was like, I miss it. I'd written several books that were like realism, I guess. And it didn't have the fun that I wanted it to have. So as I'm really starting to read fantasy and sci-fi and then finally horror again, because I was like, you know what? This is truly what I love. This is probably the best match for me anyway. I read Mexican Gothic as it's coming out, and I read Grady Hendrix. And when I realized that Grady had all of these books, it was like when I discovered Vonnegut one summer. I just couldn't stop reading it. And so I've actually, you're gonna laugh, but like I have that book. The minute it came out, I got it, How to Sell a Haunted House. And he was actually writing it when I asked him for a blurb for Whitehorse. And he was like, let me just make sure your book isn't too similar to mine because it can kind of mess up my writing process if I'm reading something that's too similar.
Yeah.
It wasn't, right? So he blurred me, which is unbelievably kind because I am, especially at the time, nobody. And Grady is like this huge phenomenon. And so I have saved that book because I know when I just am like, I need a good book to read, I can just go get it. Because otherwise, I will just
Yeah.
compulsively read everything he writes. And they'll like if he would just keep writing books, I possibly would just keep reading everything he writes. So
Yeah.
until he's dead.
Gotta you
Yeah.
gotta ration them out.
Yes.
Um, but I really loved this. I think it really gets into, the way siblings have a different experience of childhood. You have different childhoods. You may have lived in the same house, you may have had the same parents, you have different childhoods. And in this case, there are events that Mark and Louise remember differently. And we kind of get into the parents making, a decision to like, we're going to sweep this under the rug. We're going to move on from this and pretend it didn't happen. But you can't ignore trauma like that. And I think what I like about horror is that, people talk about its catharsis, and to get to that catharsis, you need confrontation. You need to get to things head on, which I mean you do in your book. It's all about confrontation. That was something I really liked about How to Sell a Haunted House.
Hendrix, I think what I admire the most about him is that he's kind of like, and this is what I admired about David Lynch, even though they're very different. If you really look at his material, some of it is incredibly odd. Like what gosh, I've forgotten the title of the book where the main character is like a rock star, but an obscure one, and then there are demons in the
We
basement.
sold our souls.
Yeah, okay. See, I read it all in succession, and so the titles are obscured in my head.
Yeah.
And I thought, that is truly one of the weirdest, like, weirdest things, but he knows structure so well. He knows exactly how to structure that novel in a traditional sense. So you're just, like, pulled along on this insane journey, right? Or the
Mhm.
one that really made his career, the title's so long I was screwed up, The Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it's like suburban vampires. I mean, and the book starts with like this discussion of Reagan and children and going to the book club. And, it's just so like he gets away with it because he just knows what he's doing at every turn. And so I always like, I'm sure you could tell in 904, there are all these plot elements, and it was fucking hell to actually put them together in a way that made any sense. Because like I was like really just, like, hey, let's hit the Sand Creek Massacre, sibling dynamic, right? All these things. So like, and just the way he's able to put it all together and pull the reader along, I just admire so much.
Yeah. For scariness rating from room temperature, fridge, or freezer, I would put it in the fridge. I will say there is a scene of eyeball trauma, and that's what I will say, that
Uh,
has really stuck with me. I feel like every single one of his books has, like, one scene where you're like, "Ugh."
right.
Like, there's, like, rats or there's, like, something. There's always
Yes.
just, like, one, at least one. It's not always just one, but there's, like, that one scene that's gonna stick out and get to you. But I mean, How to Sell a Haunted House has, like, a haunted evil doll, which is a fear of mine. So
I love that every horror person has like one thing that they're like, but that I can't do, or that it really scares me, right? Yeah, the golem that's in the box that comes to
yeah,
life, right? I know and I was like, "Is it cheesy?" But honestly, yeah, like, when I think that's a leftover, especially when you're a girl, because all you're given all these dolls, whether you want them or not. Now, I was very femmy, right? And so I wanted all the dolls, but there's always the one doll that looks a little creepy,
yeah,
especially when, like, the lights are turned off.
yeah,
You're in bed, you're in your little tiny bed, and you're, like, looking at the closet, there might be a vampire in there, that's a problem. There could be something under the bed, you're not sure about that, that's very problematic, foot cannot go off, and at the same time, oh, there's that fucking doll, there's that doll, and it's just in the shadows, and did it move? No. Gotta get to sleep, he's gotta go to school,
yeah,
so I feel like that's where that.
yeah. I mean, I loved dolls, I loved playing with dolls, but yeah, there was, like, it's, like, certain, like, porcelain dolls, like, I got one for Christmas, and that went in my closet, like, top shelf in the back, like, facing the wall. I was just like, "No, you don't even no, thank you."
This is what I love
There's
about,
just something off about you.
this doll is not that's another one that's on eBay. You should go and put haunted dolls, and they have these great descriptions. Of course, that's in 904, right? Like all the eBay listings where there are haunted objects, right? And haunted dolls or whatever. And it's pretty obvious from 904 that I'm a Conjuring fan. Like I love those movies. I'll watch them again and again. They're terrifying, but they're cozy, which is always my goal. I think Rachel Harrison, she's always able to hit that note.
Yeah.
I so admire her for that. But yeah, what kills me about The Conjuring, because 'cause I'm, like, obsessed with Ed and Lorraine Warren, and I've read books about them and, stuff and watched documentaries, is that if you look at the Annabelle in the Conjuring series, she's actually fucking terrifying. Like, they did a bang up job with that, but the actual
Mhm.
Annabelle's just Raggedy Ann. I'm like, "That's just not
Yeah.
that doesn't do it for me," you know?
Yeah, they definitely give her a scare glow up.
Oh, yeah.
So that is How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix.
I guess mine would be Diavolo then. Basically, right, if you haven't read it, it's, this woman who is, agreed to go on a vacation with her problematic family. And then when she gets to this place in it's Italy, the place is increasingly haunted and terrifying. And the siblings and parents continue to be like, "You're nuts. There's nothing wrong. You're the insane one." and she just sort of, sarcastically doesn't engage them until you want to like throw them all out the window and drive over their bodies.
There was so much that made me so angry. I think the way that her family gaslit her and the way her family held, like, mistakes that happened years ago over her head and refused to see her grow as a
Oh, yeah.
person, even though she was the most successful sibling, and it's still nothing she could do could ever be enough.
Yep. Yep. I think it was particularly maddening for me because I am living in the Midwest so much, like I said before. It's a very like I'm gonna generalize and I do apologize for that, but I was told a lot, like, I physically don't look like people here, and so they'd be like, "You're not from here." That is true. And then they would just like, "That's why are you wearing a dress? That's a dress, why are you wearing it? Why? Why?" And I'd be like, I like it," you know? So they were kind of like the characters, like the school that I physically was at for a long time in the community was just very much like every single thing I said and did or wore was absolutely unacceptable, and nothing you said made them move their opinion 1 inch, right? But Diavolo is even more infuriating because, it's her family. They should have a
Yeah.
point in which they at least try to love her. Instead, they're just increasingly cutting her out, even though she puts up with their shit the entire way. Just this gaslighting monstrosity of a novel that's honestly brilliant.
Where would you rate it on a scariness scale, on a temperature?
That's right. You have in the freezer, in the fridge, and then what was the most
Room
temperate
temperature.
room temperature?
Room
At
temperature.
least in the fridge with a little freezer.
My next pick is an upcoming release that is Blood on Her Tongue by Johanna van Veen,
Mhm.
which is deliciously gothic. This is
Mhm.
following twins, takes place in the Netherlands in the 19th century. And this is about twin sisters, and we follow Lucy, who is heading to her sister's house to go visit her because she's received some strange correspondence from her. It doesn't make any sense. And then she kind of immediately got a telegram that was like, your sister is very ill and you need to come see her right away. Um, and so that is where we open up the book and we get into their relationship. And when she gets there, her sister Sarah is very ill. She is not making sense. She keeps talking about a dead body that she saw in the bog on her like husband's giant estate. They found like a very old corpse in the bog, and she's convinced like something in the corpse has come after her, that
Ooh,
something was
wow.
awakened, and she feels that she is possessed. And Lucy and Sarah both had like a beloved aunt that was sent away to an asylum, and so Lucy has a lot of trauma surrounding that, and she's like, I will do anything to keep her from being sent away. Like, don't worry, I got this. Like, I will deal with whatever this problem is. And it is about this like sisterly bond. I will say, similar to How to Sell a Haunted House, there is also eyeball trauma, which
Oh,
really gets me.
yeah, yeah, like, I as somebody who wears contacts off and on, I'm
Yep.
100% sure like, and I oftentimes like, I don't right now, but I often have, like, really long nails. Like, not, like, absurdly long nails, but for me long, like, for writer long. In
Yeah.
other words, medium length, right? And they're pointy. I love my pointy nails. And so I constantly like I'll have like my favorite shirt and I'll put like a hole into it. I'm like, God damn it. Right. And so I'm always convinced, like, oh, that's it. I'm gonna destroy my
Mhm.
cornea today, but it was worth it. These nails look so cool.
I put press-ons on a few weeks ago for the first time that are like, because I always keep my nails very short, and I was like, I'm gonna
Yeah, yeah.
try to be cute. The minute I had to like try to put my contact in, I ripped them off. I was like, I can't with this. I hate it.
There's tricks to it. I found there are things that are much harder and there are things that are much easier. But let me tell you an absolutely absurd thing that I've done. I bought a keyboard that's very bouncy so that like there are holes like you can still type with the nails. I'm like, okay, Erica, you've committed yourself to this STEM thing a little too hard. you know?
It's like a sensory issue for me. Every time I've tried to grow my nails long, I hate the feeling of them, and I'm like, "I can't do this." The short nail life for me, as much as I
Yeah,
love the look of them on other people, I
yeah.
can't do it. And I also, like, I have a giant tub of Vaseline for my lips, and I was trying to, like, dig some out, and it all got under the nail, and it grossed me out. I was like,
Oh,
I can't deal
that's
with
there's a
this."
whole technique for that. You gotta do the front of the nail, of the whole thing. Like, I can tell when I have my nails and when I don't because every face thing that I use that's not like in a tube has, like, little divots in it, you know? Um, and
I
so
just
because I have
didn't
a
learn the
whole
tricks of the trade.
yeah. Yeah, it's a I never thought I would. I was a very, like, masculine girl in the '80s and '90s. I was, like, not into it, and then I became, like, hyper feminine, and my mom was like, "Yeah, that's the way you were as a kid," you know? So I guess that's
It's
what
swinging
happens.
back.
Yep, yep.
But yeah, I had a lot of fun with Blood on Her Tongue. I also really liked her debut novel, My Darling Dreadful Thing, and
Ah.
she just is very good at these gothic vibes and tropes, but also just, like, upping the stakes and just, this one has a lot of female rage too. You're just like,
Mm. I'm in.
I would put that in the fridge because, aforementioned eyeball trauma, and that is not the only trauma. There is more gore and other traumas to be found. But that is Blood on Her Tongue by Johanna Van Veen.
All right. Okay. And I appreciate you letting me cheat with my next. I'm going to pick, I know, a book that has been overly discussed a million times. It was kind of fundamental for me, like as I was like kind of getting back to my horror writing roots, which is Mexican Gothic. And it's cousin, not sibling. But it has what I think it's kind of what I call boy horror in a way, because it's gross out horror, like the mushroom business, which some people are like would put it in the freezer for them. I would
Yeah.
put it in the fridge with a little bit of freezer. And I again, like I really love paranormal humor, but I think it was the way again she executes like such a weird book, but with such traditional structure that it like pulled me along just perfectly. But
Mhm.
I really, what I liked about it as a side note was like Sylvia, the main character is of indigenous descent. She knows what she is. And as somebody who, some of my ancestors are from Mexico and are Apache, and they came up into the United States and Texas and like blended with, British Cherokees and Black Chickasaws, right? So it's something I think about a lot. I liked that she was confident in who she was. There was nothing stereotypical in there. It was actually really um, fundamental to the plot because, right, she's able to kind of beat the bad guy because her ancestors ingested mushrooms, right? So right, she's like perfect for their evil plot, but she also is able to foil it because of that. And I also love that she's elegant. She's well educated, and this is the '50s. There's just something about that. But I also really love that her father's like, you gotta go in and save your cousin because something's going on, and she does. As much as she's a party girl, as much as
Yeah.
she's whatever, she's like, okay. And she really does go into this incredibly strange and dangerous situation and stay there because the cousin is just not okay. And she's trying like hell to figure out what can I do to figure out what's going on here. So I felt like, and it was like a sibling dynamic because it's a terror in a way to think a sibling or a cousin that you're close to, like a sibling, would be trapped in this situation. Um, and you would go down and try to get her out of it. So
Yeah. I did. I really loved Noemi as a protagonist. She's very strong, she's very capable. We're introduced to her, like you said, as this, like, socialite party girl. Um, but she's always very unapologetically femme. She's into dresses, like, she likes dressing up, and that's never a hindrance, and that's never something that takes away from her strength at all. And, when she meets her cousin's husband's family, obviously, they're all gross and racist, and she can debate them, like, she
yep.
is toe to toe with them. And I mean,
Yeah.
like you said, strong enough to fight the big bad in the end, the big
Oh
evil.
yeah. Yep. No, she 100%, like, I adored her as an indigenous character where it didn't have to be I feel like a lot of North American Indians, feel this pressure to kind of perform that in a way, even on the page. And I've talked to like they're all my peers, right? So I've talked to them, and it's like oppressive, and we don't know how to quite manage it. And Garcia just like effortlessly just makes her indigenous, weaves it into the plot, and yet makes it a story that you're just interested in reading. And I wanted to make like in 904. my main character is kind of like that. She's very femme. She's educated. She knows who she is. She knows what she's going to take. She lives with basically her gay husband, right? And she has relationships. He does. They neither one of them are necessarily committed until the end. And I wanted to show something really different, like because in White Horse, what people liked about Carrie was that she was kind of like heavy metal, and she was like
Yeah.
a tough girl in that particular way, which is what I grew up with. Like in Idaho Springs, where I went to school, lots of girls were like that. They were like frankly, unapologetically slutty. They were like, I'm a slut, and I don't care what you think, and I love heavy metal, and I wear heavy metal T-shirts and drink beer. And yeah, they could be seen as one of the guys, just because that was the entirety of the culture, really. And I mean, they were femme with their eye makeup or hair, but otherwise, not necessarily, right? And they were so tough in their own way. But in 904, I wanted to do something like Noemi. I wanted something that was a little more, um, I don't know, different, different in that way.
Yeah.
Strength in a different way.
Yeah. I mean, we need different portrayals of that.
Yeah.
Okay, my final pick is The Honeys by Ryan LaSala. This is a young adult novel. This is about Mars, who has always been the lesser twin to his sister Caroline, who at the beginning of the book dies under horrific circumstances. This sets Mars on a mission to figure out what happened to his sister, who started kind of growing distant in her final days. And to do that, he has to go to the preppy summer camp that she would go to every year that he was excluded from because he was genderqueer, and his family kind of they're a political family, they kind of tried to keep him out of the spotlight a little bit, but he's like, "No, I'm going back." He had gone there one summer, and he goes back, and he finds that it's a lot of toxic patriarchal traditions, it's rigid gender roles. But he's on a mission to figure out what happened to his sister. And to do that, he befriends the Honeys, which were the girls that his sister used to hang out with. And they're kind of this mysterious group of girls that tend to the beehives behind the cabin. And I'm like, awesome. I love like a girl group with a name, you know?
Yes, truest thing. Yes, I'm a total sucker for that as well. I didn't realize it till you said that.
As you're reading it, you are really just rooting for Mars. Like, you see him have so many wins, and it is kind of cathartic as he's like coming up against these systems, and you're like, yeah, tell him how it is. But as he's coming across things, you realize there's a lot of systemic issues and things that go way further than you could have imagined. Just how deep all of it goes. I will say this had some body horror that I was not expecting for a YA novel when you find out a little bit more about the honeys and what they're into.
I think about the right, the body horror thing, because I don't want it, but you kind of can't do even girl horror without a little bit of it. So sorry to interrupt you. Yeah.
It's all good. I do. I love it. And this was just like so full of rage. And I was like, it's not like constant body horror. Like, you build up to it.
So would you put it in the freezer?
I would say it's close to it for like a young adult novel. I would say like this is bordering on that. But that is The Honeys by Ryan LaSala. Very fun for me, dark, fun summer camp horror.
Yeah, no, there's something great about the summer camp thing, right? Because it really actually is a place of horror. My parents definitely sent me to one, and as usual, I was just this awkward nerd who just made everyone uncomfortable by existing. And so
Mhm.
really you're just trapped in that environment in a cabin full of people who kind of don't like you for like a month.
I mean, when you're there, you're stuck there. What are you gonna
Yes,
do?
you are.
All
Yes.
the people
Don't
you go to mess hall with and go do archery or swim or canoe or whatever.
can't really go to your room.
Yeah. All right, what's your final pick?
I'm going to pick Paul Tremblay's Head Full of Ghosts, and he was nice enough to blurb 904, which honestly, I appreciate it because the guy is just so busy, but he's such a kind guy. Um, yeah, so essentially, right, it's about a girl, siblings, parents. Parents are having issues, and the sibling is who's claiming that she's possessed by a demon, if I remember correctly. um, is kind of an asshole, right? And she's awful to the younger sibling, right? And you're very, very sympathetic to the younger sibling. And as the book progresses and they, becomes a reality show and you have people coming in, and I definitely at the beginning of the book was questioning whether she was possessed or not. And then I think there's a bit of a flip at a certain point too there. I can't even remember now, and sort of it's two timelines, which I always admire because, like, to me that's just like really, really hard to do in a serious way. I'll do like bits and pieces and blips in a different timeline, but really managing two timelines well is hard to do, and I think you did it really well. But to me, the dynamic there is she's awful to the younger sibling, just tremendously awful. And then you feel sorry for the younger sibling, and you always feel sorry for the younger sibling, but eventually you start to sympathize with the older one and maybe see why she's doing this. And so that kind of flip, I think, in terms of character, it's hard to do, is to make someone kind of villainous and then make you feel sorry for them. It's just smart and it's hard to execute. So I admired that.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of balls up in the air with A Head Full of Ghosts. I absolutely loved it. I think that was like one of my first big books that I was like, I think I'm obsessed with horror. I think we also need to mention probably We Have Always Lived in the Castle, where it's just kind of like the inspiration for it. But I loved the devices used. I loved kind of the blog post chapters that we get kind of deconstructing this reality show that they filmed about this sister being possessed. It was a lot, and I think it just did a lot of things well. And yeah, this sister dynamic where you don't know what the truth is.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about Tremblay that I love is that, of course, somebody who, did her PhD and is a creative writing professor and wrote what you might call literary realism for a long time, although I was, only in one book what I would say was particularly postmodern or experimental. But they're obsessed with this idea. They're like, I'm so meta, I'm so postmodern, I'm so, and yet it seems like the trick is always the same trick over and over again. It's not particularly clever. But what what he does and what Polinick does, right? And I try to do a little bit of 904 with these eBay entries, these sort of nonfiction elements that make you question the baseline reality. If you do it right, it gives it a stronger sense of the word that I always mispronounce, verisimilitude, truthfulness, it gives it this sense of reality. And because like you're questioning it. So in that process of questioning it and having this other reality on top of it, it it allows you to like your natural ability to be like, is this real? And it sort of like forces you into that space, like, well, maybe it's not real. So in that going back and forth, it's more fun, if that makes any sense. And you're gonna bounce back to it must be real even harder.
Yeah.
I would put it in the freezer in the beginning and then it firmly goes in the fridge, but not in a bad way.
Yeah. I did want to mention one honorable mention that almost made it, and that was A Black and Endless Sky by Matthew Lyons. And this follows an adult brother and sister pair. The brother has recently gotten divorced, and his estranged sister essentially comes to pick him up and all his stuff and to like move back home. So it's just like a lot of fraught situations happening like all at once. Like this brother and sister were estranged. He has literally just gotten divorced. Now they have this long road trip that they need to go on to get him back home. Um, and the sister gets into an altercation at a biker bar,
Okay.
and yep, as you do. And they are being chased by this biker gang. But also, at some point in this road trip, they come across this field where something possesses the sister. So there's just like a lot going on. You got a demon possessed sister being chased by bikers, being chased by people who want to help with this possession. It's just like a very like fast-paced, action-packed book, also dealing with this fraught sibling dynamic in a car on the road.
Yeah, that sounds very Lions. Like I was asked to blur up a Mask of Flies, and that's just very, very him. I haven't read that yet. But I wanted to go back to the whole demon possessed. When you have someone you love and they do things you don't understand. It's like they're possessed because you don't know how you can love someone who's also totally monstrous to you. So I
Yeah.
love that analogy. That makes a lot of sense. Probably for this one, which I don't know if you'd put in the freezer or in the fridge, but and also for Tremblay's, right? For how it had made of ghosts or full of ghosts. Yeah.
Uh, I would say fridge.
Yeah, he's fridge in a good way, but there are a lot of elements that are still fun, cool horror elements, right?
Yeah. I mean, it was very fast paced and temperature rating is not a quality of the book. It's just like
Right.
how
Right.
scary was it? And this I say was very fast paced and a lot of fun. And the stakes are high.
You know, I have to admit, I do love a book that scares me, like in terms of paranormal, like Mallerman's incidents around the house. There is a sibling dynamic, although I want to say it's not. Isn't there another sibling? Yeah. I'm really wondering why that didn't stick out in my mind because I love that book and I'm talking about it constantly. And the fact that it really deeply scared me absolutely was like, and I know my work isn't really, it's probably in the fridge, but like that it's in the freezer in that specific way just scratches an itch for me that is just like ultimately very satisfying. So I have to admit, I will look for that. Can't deny it.
Well, one of the traditions that we have on the show is to ask guests for a chilling obsession. So that is something you have been enjoying in horror lately. So what have you
Yeah,
been enjoying?
I definitely, again, I can't kind of stop thinking about incidents around the house. And I think it's definitely girl horror for me because again, it's like very paranormal, although you're very concerned for this physicality of this family. And they're also living a suburban nightmare because they're having to go from house to house and they're kind of getting kicked out of some of them because like these people are like, oh, okay. And then they experience it and they're like, get out, because they realize this thing is coming with the boy. Um, and I think, I'm so obsessed with it because it is effectively scary. And I know this sounds counterintuitive, but like it helps me to sleep because it distracts me from everything else when it's not scary. So like it helps me to sleep and my boyfriend's like, you're insane. And I'm like, you just watched a crime show where all the people died and were gunned down. But it's the way it works for me. And that worked for me really, really well. Definitely helped me sleep. And it was another one where I'm always trying, probably because I'm always thinking about historical trauma and personal trauma and then the fun scares and how that all interplays. So I think I'm successful sometimes with that and sometimes I'm not. But what I liked about Mallerman was it didn't really try to do all that stuff. There was ultimately, I think, some familial trauma with the parents, but mainly it just focused on how to scare the shit out of you in terms of this ghost. And it was so simple. Like the through line was so simple and so effective. So I like can't get over it because it worked so well.
Yeah, it was very effective. I was putting off reading it because I don't always get along with, child narrators, but the way everyone was talking about it, I was like, "Okay, I will have to give this a try." And I was like, "Okay, this was effectively creepy."
Oh God, that I think that's really hard. I think a lot of people even like a kid character and it comes off as hilariously saccharine and you're like, why?
Yes,
You know?
that's usually my issue.
Yes, totally.
Or I don't know, maybe it's as someone who has kids, so I know the way kids talk and I know what, like, the normal milestones are that a lot of things just don't read real. They read as an
Totally.
adult trying too much. Like, I hear the adult effort, I
Oh,
guess, is, like, my
absolutely.
thing. That's what I
Oh,
hear.
oh god, and it's always just there to show, like, how nice one of the characters are because they're not an asshole to the kid, and I'm like, that is stupid, you know?
Well, the second tradition that we have on the show is to ask our guests for a final girl song. So if you are the final girl in a horror movie, what is the song? What is playing?
That is an incredibly weird and wonderful question. Um, yeah, I think I'm gonna go I think it would have to be even though I was more of a hip hop guy and I was more of a indie rock guy as a teenager, heavy metal, that's why it ended up in White Horse, right, was the backdrop of my life because that's all that people were listening to at that time in that place. So it would have to be really anything by Megadeth.
Okay.
Like Yeah, really anything by Megadeth, and it would probably be Appetite for Destruction.
Nice. Do you have, like, a scene playing? I know some people are like, "This is the smash cut to credits. This is, like, final girl covered in blood. This is, like."
I think that Stephen Graham Jones said something really like it's really funny because like we're both indigenous, so people have said like, "Wow, your work is so similar," and I just cannot imagine a writer more different in terms than I am really. Although I love Stephen and we do a lot of events together, but he said something about why the slasher compels him and the final girl idea compels him so much. I
Mhm.
also like Cynthia Pelayo's idea that, like, hey, the monster, the final girl could be a final boy and the monster could be a girl. And I think that's really important too. But it's something that's been relevant in my life as somebody who was bullied a lot as a child and had to re experience it a lot as an adult, as a writer. He said part of why he compels him is the idea of like you're running from the monster and they're running from the monster because you're sure you're going to die. There's not you cannot survive except to run. And what are you going to do when you cannot run anymore? What are you going to do when you finally have to face the monster? And
Yeah.
I think that's a really because I think the sad answer is most people die, and why the final girl in that final moment survives is because she's either has to or she's lucky or some combination of that, and she really is built to survive. And there are times in which I have felt that, like, I guess I'm built to survive. So what I would imagine would be like those final steps of facing the monster, and what would I do?
Yeah. Appetite for Destruction plays.
Yeah, totally.
Right, well, I love that. I keep a playlist with everyone's answers on Spotify,
I
so
love it.
I will add it to the playlist. Yeah, final girl vibes.
Yeah, fantastic.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on here and chatting with me about the haunting of room 904 and siblings in horror. Where can people find you online?
Yeah, basically, I'm the most on Instagram. I'm on Blue Sky. I'm really not on Twitter anymore, except as a placeholder. Um, I'm on Threads. I'm on TikTok. It's just ErikaTWurth, just to make it simple as the spelling of my name. But I'm most present on Instagram, though you will have to put up with images of my dogs in clothing, various
I
outfits,
don't think anyone will complain about that.
and if
I
they
think that's a
do,
plus.
yeah, then fuck them.
This is
They just aren't
motivation to follow
I'm just
you.
a boy of poodles and outfits. So
Poodles? Oh my gosh. No, who can say no to that? Right. Well, listeners, go check out The Haunting of Room 904. And thank you again.
thank you for having me.
Books in the Freezer is a bi weekly podcast. We post episodes every other Tuesday. You can find us on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, TikTok, Facebook at Books in the Freezer, or you can send us an email at booksinthefreezer@gmail.com. Show notes for this episode and all previous episodes will be at booksinthefreezer.com, where you can find a list of the movies and books mentioned, as well as links to several different ways you can support the podcast. I have been your host, Stephanie Gagne. Thank you so much for listening, and see you next time on Books in the Freezer.